Welcome to Spicy Family Scandals, where real-life drama meets hard-earned wisdom. Today's story is about betrayal, resilience, and the power of standing up for yourself. Let's dive in.
I don't know if I'm looking for advice or just a place to vent, but my heart feels like it's been stomped on, and I don't know how to pick up the pieces. For context, I'm 30, married to Mike, 32, for 6 years. We've got 2 kids, Emma, 4, and Josh, 2. I thought I had a pretty decent life. Sure, marriage with young kids isn't glamorous, but I gave it my all. The one dark spot? Mike's mother, Nancy. That woman has never liked me. If she's not critiquing my cooking, how do you ruin spaghetti? She's rolling her eyes at my parenting. Kids need structure, not cuddles, dear. I tried so hard for years to please her, taking her advice, swallowing her insults, and pretending not to notice when she'd rearrange my kitchen cabinets behind my back. Mike always told me to ignore her, that it's just how she is.
So I did.
But last weekend, she crossed a line I didn't even know existed. We were hosting dinner at our house, and as usual, Nancy made herself comfortable on my couch while I juggled dinner prep, the kids, and cleaning. Mike was sitting there too, watching football, completely oblivious. Dinner was chaotic, as meals with toddlers usually are. I ended up excusing myself early to put Josh to bed because he was overtired and cranky. And that's when it happened. As I came down the hall, I froze. Nancy's voice, sharp and condescending, floated into the room. Mike, your wife is useless as a mother and a partner. You deserve someone better. My heart stopped. But what killed me, what absolutely shattered me, was Mike's reply. He sighed and said, in the most defeated tone, I know, Mom. I've given up trying. I couldn't breathe. My own husband, the man I loved, built a life with, had children with, agreeing that I was useless? Something in me broke in that moment. I don't even remember the rest of the night. I didn't confront them, didn't scream, didn't cry. I just shut down. I went through the motions like a robot, clearing dishes, wiping counters, tucking Emma into bed. My body was there, but my mind? It was somewhere else entirely. When Mike climbed into bed later, I didn't say a word. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, replaying the words in my head. Over and over. Useless. 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 I thought about all the things I did every single day to keep our family afloat. The 5 a.m. wake-ups when Josh was teething. The laundry. The meals. The baths. The work-from-home job I juggled during nap time so we could afford nice things. Was I really useless? By 3 a.m., I had made up my mind. I couldn't keep doing this, breaking my back for people who didn't see me, who didn't value me. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Mike was snoring, completely unaware of the storm brewing next to him. I made breakfast for the kids, packed a small bag, and scribbled a note. I left it on the dining table, right in Nancy's favorite spot, before kissing Emma and Josh goodbye. The note said, since I'm so useless, I'll let you 2 figure out how to cook, clean, and care for the kids. I'll be staying with my sister for a while. Good luck. Then I walked out the door and didn't look back. When I pulled into my sister's driveway, I expected to feel relief. Instead, my hands were shaking and my heart pounded in my chest like I'd just run a marathon. What the heck was I doing? Walking out on my husband and kids, leaving them with a note like I was the villain? But then I remembered Mike's voice, so casual, so apathetic. I know, Mom. I've given up trying. My throat tightened, and I forced the memory down like bile. My sister, Katie, opened the door with a raised eyebrow. You look like hell. I feel like it. I barely made it inside before my knees buckled. Katie caught me and led me to the couch.
Seat. Talk.
Start from the beginning. I told her everything. Nancy's comments, Mike's sigh, the note I left on the table, every last detail. By the time I finished, Katie's expression had shifted from concern to outright fury. That spineless little prick, she hissed. And don't get me started on Nancy. Who says that to someone's face, let alone about them? Useless? Are they insane? I expected her to say I'd overreacted, that I should have talked to Mike first or fought back harder. But Katie nodded like walking out was the most natural thing in the world. You did the right thing. Let him sit in his mess for once. I wanted to believe that, but my guilt gnawed at me. What about Emma and Josh? Would they be scared? Was Mike even capable of keeping it together without me? The answer came sooner than I thought. By lunchtime, my phone was vibrating nonstop. Missed calls, texts, all from Mike. Mike, where are you? Mike, this isn't funny, my name. The kids are asking for you. Mike, what do you mean you're staying with Katie? Come back. Let's talk. Then came a picture that made me choke on my coffee. It was Josh, still in his pajamas, sitting in his high chair. Crumbs and half-eaten food were everywhere. Mike's caption read, what do you get him to eat? I shouldn't have laughed, but I did. Welcome to my world, Mike. The texts escalated throughout the afternoon. Mike, your mom called, she's worried. Mike, Nancy's freaking out. She doesn't know how to calm Emma down. Mike, this house is falling apart. Please come home. I ignored every single one. Petty? Maybe. But for once, I wanted them to feel the weight of everything I did. Every diaper changed, every tantrum soothed, every invisible task that no one noticed but everyone took for granted. By evening, Mike was calling Katie. She smirked as she answered the phone. Hello, Mike. Yes, she's here. No, she's not coming to the phone. Oh. Nancy wants to talk to her. Katie shot me a wicked grin. Tell your mom, she can figure it out. It's her chance to prove she's a better mother, right? I snorted into my wine. Katie hung up a minute later, her face triumphant. He's desperate. I'd give it one more day before they completely unravel. And boy, was she right. The next morning, Mike showed up on Katie's doorstep, looking like he'd spent the night in a war zone. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, and he was holding Josh, who looked equally miserable. Please, he started, his voice raw. Just hear me out. I crossed my arms, refusing to let him off the hook that easily. Where's Nancy? She's at home with Emma. He swallowed hard. She's overwhelmed. She thought this would be easy, and it's not. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, I thought I was useless. Shouldn't it be a breeze without me? Mike winced like I'd slapped him. I messed up. I know I messed up, okay? But Nancy, she didn't mean it. And what I said, I don't even know why I said that. Oh, I think you do. I shot back, my voice sharp. It's because you believe it. You think everything I do, everything I sacrifice, is just background noise. You've given up trying? Mike, I've been holding this family together by the seams while you sit on the sidelines. And your mother? She's been waiting for me to fail since day one. Well, congratulations. You got what you wanted. Josh squirmed in Mike's arms, sensing the tension. Mike's shoulders slumped. For the first time in years, he looked completely and utterly defeated. I didn't know how hard it was, he admitted, his voice cracking. I didn't know. Maybe you should have paid attention, I said quietly. Katie cleared her throat from the kitchen. I'll give you 2 minutes. As she left, Mike set Josh down and stepped closer to me.
I'm sorry. For everything.
I don't want to lose you. I stared at him, searching his face for sincerity. Part of me wanted to scream, cry, let all my anger explode. Another part of me, exhausted and fragile, just wanted to collapse into his arms. But I didn't do either. You've got a lot to prove, Mike, I said, my voice calm but firm. To me and to yourself. I'm not coming home until I know things are going to change. His face paled, but he nodded. Okay, whatever it takes. When he left, Katie gave me a slow clap. That was brutal. I loved it. But inside, I was shaking. What if this was the beginning of the end? What if Mike and I couldn't fix what was broken? For now, all I could do was wait and see if he was really willing to fight for us. I spent the next 2 days at Katie's house, watching my phone buzz endlessly with missed calls and texts. Each notification made my stomach twist, but I didn't cave. Mike was spiraling, and I could practically feel the chaos through his messages. By the second night, Mike's tone had shifted. Mike, I don't know how to do this. Josh cried for 2 hours before I could get him to sleep. Emma refuses to eat anything I make. Please just talk to me. Mike, Mom's overwhelmed. She thought it'd be easier, but it's not. She's sorry, okay?
Was she, though?
That woman had made me feel like I was failing at life since the day I married her son. I didn't believe for a second that Nancy had suddenly realized the error of her ways. She was probably just shocked that the useless wife she always insulted had the audacity to leave. Katie caught me glaring at my screen and plopped down beside me on the couch, wine in hand. "I don't get it," she said, her voice casual but sharp. "If Mike's drowning this badly, why hasn't Nancy swooped in like the savior she thinks she is?" I shrugged, swirling my glass. She probably realized she can't keep up with two toddlers. "Welcome to my world." Katie smirked. "Karma's a real witch, huh?" I wanted to laugh, but all I could think about was my kids. Josh's little curls bouncing as he toddled after me, Emma's big eyes staring up whenever she asked for a bedtime story. Guilt started to creep back in, a whisper in the back of my mind. What kind of mother walks away? But then I remembered Mike's voice. "I've given up trying."
No.
I wasn't walking away. I was teaching him that I wasn't disposable. Late the next morning, just as I was about to pour my coffee, the doorbell rang.
Katie groaned.
If that's Mike again, I swear. It wasn't Mike. It was Nancy. I froze, coffee cup halfway to my lips. Katie peeked through the window blinds and swore under her breath. "She's alone. Should I send her packing?" "No," I muttered, squaring my shoulders. "Let her in." Katie gave me a skeptical look but opened the door anyway. Nancy stepped in, looking far less put together than usual. Her pearl earrings were missing, and she was wearing what I suspected were yesterday's clothes. She clutched her handbag like it might give her strength, her lips pursed, so tight they were nearly white. "Where are my grandchildren?" she snapped, skipping all pleasantries. "Good morning to you too, Nancy," Katie said flatly, crossing her arms as she leaned against the doorframe. I took a deep breath. They're with Mike, where they should be. Nancy's eyes narrowed as she turned to me. "This stunt of yours, leaving your children and husband like that, it's irresponsible and selfish. What kind of mother does this?" Her words hit exactly where she knew they would, like arrows aimed at my heart. But I didn't flinch. Not this time. What kind of grandmother calls the mother of her grandchildren useless? I shot back, my voice calm but cold. Nancy blinked, thrown off, for just a second. "That's not."
No.
"You don't get to rewrite it," I interrupted. "You said it. I heard it. And Mike agreed with you." Her face turned pink, her mouth opening and closing like she wanted to argue, but didn't know how. I stepped closer, forcing her to look me in the eye. "Do you know what it's like to give everything you have, every ounce of love and energy, only to have it dismissed? To be invisible in your own home?" Nancy stayed silent. For the first time ever, I saw doubt flicker in her eyes. "You think I'm selfish?" I continued, my voice trembling despite my best efforts.
Fine.
"Call it what you want. But I'm not going back to that house until both you and your son learn what I'm worth." Katie cleared her throat from behind us. "I think it's time you left, Nancy." Nancy hesitated, her jaw tight, but eventually turned and marched toward the door. Before leaving, she paused and looked over her shoulder. "Mike's miserable. The children need you." She said it like it was a trump card, like the mere mention of my kids would make me fold. It almost did. Almost. "They'll survive," I said softly, more to convince myself than her. When the door shut behind her, Katie let out a low whistle. "That woman really doesn't quit." "No," I agreed, sinking onto the couch. My hands were shaking again, but I felt something else too, a small, stubborn spark of satisfaction. For once, Nancy didn't get the last word. The house was eerily quiet when I finally walked back in 3 days later. I don't know what I expected. Maybe Mike and Nancy waiting in ambush, ready to spit out more criticisms, but instead, the silence was deafening. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator and the faint sound of cartoons from the living room. I stepped into the house cautiously, my bag still hanging off my shoulder. The place smelled different, like takeout and stale air instead of the usual scent of lavender cleaner and fresh coffee. The sight that met me nearly made me laugh and cry at the same time. The living room looked like a tornado had torn through it. Toys were scattered across the floor, some clearly stepped on. A half-eaten bowl of cereal sat on the coffee table, milk crusted at the edges. Dirty clothes were piled in the corner. I spotted one of Josh's stuffed animals wedged halfway under the couch. And then I heard it, small feet padding across the hardwood. "Mommy." Emma appeared in the hallway, her hair wild and her face sticky, with something I didn't want to identify. She launched herself into my arms, her little sobs breaking whatever resolve I had left. Josh wasn't far behind, waddling toward me with his arms stretched out. His cheeks were red and tear-streaked. I sank to my knees, clutching both of them, their little bodies trembling. "Where did you go?" Emma whispered into my shoulder. "I missed you." Guilt hit me like a freight train, but I forced myself to hold steady. "I missed you too, baby. Mommy just needed a little break." Josh sniffled, patting my cheek like he was making sure I was real. From the corner of my eye, I saw Mike standing in the doorway to the kitchen. He looked like hell, unshaven, disheveled, and utterly defeated. He held a dish towel in one hand, his gaze wary as he watched me. "You came back," he said quietly. I stood up slowly, still holding Josh on my hip. "For them," I replied, meeting his eyes. "Not for you." Mike flinched. I didn't care. He deserved to hear it. The weight of everything he'd said, and everything he'd let Nancy say, was still fresh in my mind. I hadn't come back to sweep this under the rug. If anything, I wanted him to see exactly what life looked like when I stopped holding it together. "Emma," I said softly, brushing her hair back. "Why don't you take your brother to the playroom for a little bit? Mommy and Daddy need to talk." Emma nodded, her face still worried, but she took Josh's hand and led him down the hall. Once their giggles faded, I turned back to Mike. "What do you want me to say?" he asked, spreading his hands helplessly. "That I screwed up? That I'm sorry? Because I am."
I'm sorry. Okay.
"I don't know how to do this without you." I shook my head. "That's the problem, Mike. You don't even try. I've been doing everything, while you sit there and let your mother tear me apart." "I didn't mean it," he said quickly. "What I said to her, I didn't mean it." "Then why did you say it?" I shot back, my voice rising. "Why was it so easy for you to sit there and agree with her? Do you even realize how much that hurt? How much it broke me?" Mike opened his mouth, then closed it again, guilt flickering across his face. "I don't know," he admitted finally. "Maybe because I felt like I couldn't win. Mom's always in my ear, telling me how things should be, how you're not doing this or that. And I guess I stopped standing up for you. For us." His honesty caught me off guard, but it wasn't enough. "That's not an excuse," I said coldly. "You don't get to give up while I'm drowning, Mike. That's not how this works." He ran a hand through his hair, sighing deeply. I know that now." He ran a hand through his hair, sighing deeply. I know that now." When you left, his voice cracked slightly, and for the first time, I saw tears welling up in his eyes. "I didn't realize how much you do. I didn't realize how much I've been taking you for granted." I stared at him, my anger warring with the faintest twinge of sympathy. "And Nancy?" Mike winced. "She's ashamed. She wouldn't admit it outright, but I could see it. She thought she could handle everything better than you. She lasted 2 days before she was begging me to call you." I crossed my arms, my heart hardening again. "I don't care if she's ashamed." Her words cut deep. "Mike, I've put up with her for years for you, and I'm done being the villain in her eyes." "I'll talk to her," Mike said quickly. "No, scratch that. I'll make her understand that if she wants to be part of this family, she has to respect you." I should have done that a long time ago. The silence that followed was heavy. I didn't know if I could trust him. Words were easy. Actions were harder. "Here's the deal, Mike," I said finally, my voice steady. "Things are going to change. I'm not going to be the invisible workhorse anymore. You're going to step up as a husband and as a father. And Nancy? She doesn't get to walk all over me ever again." Mike nodded, his expression serious. "Okay. And if you screw this up," I added, my eyes narrowing, "I'm gone. For good." His face paled, but he didn't argue. "I won't screw this up," he said quietly. "I promise." Promises weren't enough for me anymore. But for the sake of my kids, for the sake of what we'd built, I was willing to give him a chance. But this time, I wasn't going to let him, or Nancy, forget just how much I was worth. I wish I could say Mike's promises immediately fixed everything, but life isn't that simple. For the first 2 days after I returned, the house was unnervingly quiet, like the calm before a storm. Mike walked on eggshells around me, taking on as much as he could. He made breakfast for the kids, folded laundry, even tried to cook dinner one night. It was almost comical how clueless he looked holding a spatula, staring down at a burnt omelet like it might start talking to him. But I wasn't ready to let my guard down yet. Mike's guilt felt fresh, and I couldn't shake the memory of Nancy's words or his sigh of agreement. In my mind, those moments looped on repeat, daring me to let my anger resurface. Then Nancy called. I was unloading the dishwasher when my phone buzzed. Seeing her name on the screen made me pause, my stomach twisting with irritation and dread. For a second, I thought about ignoring it, but something in me wanted to hear what she had to say. I answered, keeping my voice flat. Hello. My name, she started, her tone tight but trying to sound polite. I thought we should talk.
About what?
I asked, wiping down a plate with more force than necessary. A pause. I want to apologize. I may have said some things out of line. Out of line? Out of line? I clenched the phone tighter, biting back my immediate response. Is that what you're calling it now? Nancy sighed heavily, as though this was just as hard for her as it was for me. Look, I didn't realize how much you handle around there. I thought Mike was exaggerating, but you were wrong. I finished for her. Say it, Nancy. You were wrong about me. There was silence on her end, and for a moment, I thought she'd hang up. Finally, she spoke, her voice clipped but quieter. I was wrong. It wasn't the heartfelt apology I deserved, but I took it. Baby steps. What you said really hurt me, I added, refusing to let her off the hook so easily. For years, I've let your comments slide because I thought I could handle it. But you don't get to treat me like I'm nothing. Not anymore. She hesitated, and then, to my surprise, she muttered, I'll try to do better. I hung up the phone without another word. I didn't feel triumphant, but I felt lighter. Nancy had cracked, if only slightly, and maybe, just maybe, that was a start. That night, Mike came to me while I was tucking Emma into bed. Can we talk? He asked softly. I nodded, brushing Emma's hair back as her eyes fluttered closed. Once she was asleep, Mike led me to the living room. It was still a mess despite his best efforts, blocks scattered across the rug, an abandoned sippy cup on the armrest. I talked to Mom, he started, sitting across from me. She told me she called you. She did, I said shortly. He nodded, rubbing his hands together nervously. She's trying, okay? And so am I. I don't want to lose you, but I need to know, can we come back from this? I stared at him for a long moment, unsure how to answer.
Could we?
Trust, once broken, didn't mend overnight.
I don't know, Mike.
I think it's going to take more than a few chores and an apology from your mom to fix this. I get that, he said quickly, leaning forward.
Ido.
But I'm ready to fight for us this time. For real. I searched his face, trying to decide if this was genuine or just guilt talking. For the first time, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time, determination. We'll see, I said finally. But you're going to have to prove it to me. You and Nancy both. Mike nodded, his expression serious. I will. As I sat there, watching him try to piece together the broken bits of our marriage, I realized something. I wasn't just doing this for him, or for us. I was doing it for me. For my kids. I wanted them to see what respect looked like, what love should feel like. And if Mike couldn't step up, if Nancy couldn't learn to keep her sharp tongue in check, then I wouldn't hesitate to walk away for good. For now, I was watching, waiting, because this time, I held the power. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of the kids giggling, not crying, and for a split second, I wondered if I was dreaming. I slipped out of bed, my movements cautious, as I made my way to the kitchen. And there they were. Mike stood at the stove, still in his wrinkled t-shirt and sweatpants, looking like a man on the brink of collapse, but trying anyway. He was flipping what I think were supposed to be pancakes, though they looked more like charred hockey pucks. Emma sat at the table, giggling uncontrollably as Josh smacked a sticky, lopsided pancake with a spoon like it was an enemy combatant. Mike turned when he heard me, his face lighting up with the smallest, nervous smile. Morning. I crossed my arms, arching an eyebrow. What's this? He shrugged, flipping another doomed pancake. Breakfast. Or, at least an attempt. I watched him, something sharp tugging at my chest. He looked out of place, so awkward, so out of his element, like a man learning how to navigate a foreign land. For a moment, it almost made me soften. Almost. Pancakes are supposed to be round, I pointed out. Yeah, well, circles are hard. He shot back, though there was no frustration in his voice, just that boyish charm I hadn't seen in years. Emma piped up, grinning through a mouthful. Daddy said he's bad at this, but he's trying. Isn't that funny, Mommy? Yeah, it's hilarious, I replied dryly, though a tiny, reluctant smile tugged at my lips. Mike turned off the stove, sliding a plate of burnt pancakes onto the table. He looked at me, serious again. I thought about what you said, about stepping up. I know I don't get a medal for doing the bare minimum, but I want you to see that I'm trying. I stared at him for a long second before sitting down at the table. Josh immediately reached for me, his sticky little hands grabbing at my arm as if to say, "Don't leave again." My heart clenched. Mike watched quietly as I took a small bite of one of the pancakes, grimacing at the taste. "Okay," I said, setting my fork down. "That's disgusting. But I see the effort." His lips twitched into a smile, but he didn't push. He was learning, slowly, carefully, that this wouldn't be fixed with a quick apology or burnt breakfast. Just as I was about to say something else, my phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced over and felt my stomach drop.
Nancy.
Mike noticed and sighed. "She wants to come over today." I looked at him sharply. "Why?" "She says she wants to apologize. Properly this time." I scoffed. "Oh, so now she's ready?" "Look," Mike said, pinching the bridge of his nose. "I'm not saying you have to forgive her. I just think maybe hearing her out would help. She's embarrassed, okay? You proved her wrong." I didn't like the idea of Nancy stepping foot in my house again, not after everything, but at the same time, I wanted to hear her squirm. I wanted to look her in the eye and see her admit she was wrong about me, about everything. "Fine," I said finally. "She can come. But if she pulls anything, Mike, she's out. I mean it." He nodded quickly, like he expected nothing less. Nancy arrived that afternoon, and I swear I felt the temperature in the house drop the second she walked through the door. She wasn't her usual pristine self, no pearls, no perfectly styled hair. She looked small, almost uncomfortable, like she knew she didn't belong here. I sat on the couch with Josh on my lap while Emma colored at the coffee table. Mike hovered near the doorway, ready to jump in if things got ugly. Nancy stood awkwardly for a moment before clearing her throat. "Thank you for letting me come over." I said nothing, watching her like a hawk. She finally sat down on the armchair across from me, clasping her hands tightly in her lap. "I owe you an apology," she said, her voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. "What I said last weekend, it was cruel and unfair. I was wrong." I blinked, stunned for a moment at the straightforwardness of it. Nancy wasn't the type to admit fault, yet here she was. "I think," she continued, glancing briefly at Mike, "I've spent so long trying to be right about everything that I didn't see what you actually do for this family. I thought I knew better. I didn't." Her words were careful, but there was truth in them. She looked at me then, really looked at me, not with disdain or superiority, but with something I could only describe as regret. "You're not useless, my name. I see that now." A tense silence settled between us, and I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to snap back, to remind her of every insult, every little jab she'd thrown my way over the years. But another part of me, the tired, aching part, just wanted to move forward. "I'm glad you see it now," I said finally, my voice steady. "But it's going to take more than words to fix this." Nancy nodded, standing up as if she knew there was nothing else to say. Mike followed her to the door, and as she left, I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. When Mike came back, he sat down next to me, watching as Josh played with my hair. "How do you feel?" he asked softly. I thought about it for a moment. "Like she's trying. Like you're trying. But I'm not just going to forget, Mike." "I don't want you to," he replied. "I want to earn back your trust." For the first time in a long time, I believed him. I didn't know what the future would look like for us, but one thing was clear. I wasn't the woman I'd been 3 days ago. I was stronger. And I wasn't going to let anyone, not even Nancy, make me forget my worth ever again. The next few days were a careful dance. Mike continued trying, really trying. He took charge with the kids, doing bedtime, bath time, and all the messy in-betweens. I could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the kind of bone-deep tired I knew too well, but he didn't complain. For once, he understood. Nancy stayed quiet, probably too embarrassed to push any further, but the tension hung around like a shadow. Part of me wondered if she was waiting for me to fail again, waiting for the useless wife she imagined to crumble. But I didn't. One night, a week after Nancy's visit, I caught Mike sitting at the dining table with his head in his hands. The house was quiet, the kids finally asleep. I hesitated, then sat across from him, breaking the silence. "Are you okay?" Mike lifted his head and looked at me with something I hadn't seen in years. Humility. "I had no idea how much you do. Every day. It's like," he sighed, shaking his head. "It's like you've been carrying this weight alone, and I didn't even notice." The honesty in his voice chipped away at the wall I'd built around myself. "Because you didn't want to notice," I said softly. "It was easier to look the other way." Mike winced but nodded. "You're right. I let Mom's words poison how I saw things. I let her get in my head, and I stopped appreciating you. I'm so sorry for that, and I know it's going to take a long time for you to trust me again." I studied him, trying to find the man I married in those tired eyes. "Why now, Mike? Why are you just seeing it now?" He looked down at his hands. "Because when you left, I realized what life would look like without you. I saw what I took for granted, and I hated it. I hated myself for it." There was something in his voice that broke through my anger, a kind of vulnerability that I hadn't heard from him in years. "I didn't leave to punish you," I said, my voice steady. "I left because I had to show you and Nancy that I'm not here to be walked over. I'm not here to be your backup plan while you give up. I deserve better than that, Mike." "You do," he said immediately. "You deserve so much more than what I've given you." A part of me wanted to cry. Another part wanted to scream. It's too late. But the truth was, I didn't know what I wanted yet. I only knew that I wasn't the same woman who had quietly tolerated years of insults and neglect. "I need time," I told him finally. "Time to see if you mean it. Time to decide if this can work again." Mike nodded, not arguing, not begging, just accepting. "Take all the time you need. I'll prove it to you, I promise." The next morning, I woke up to something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not the kind that comes from everything being perfect, but the kind you feel when you know you've taken control of your life. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping coffee as Mike struggled to pack lunches for the kids. He was learning. Slowly, awkwardly, but learning. Emma toddled up to me with a picture she'd drawn me, holding her hand with Josh on my other side. "This is us, Mommy," she said proudly. I smiled, my chest tightening as I looked at the picture. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." In that moment, I knew something with absolute certainty. I would be okay. Whether Mike and I worked things out or not, I would be okay. Because I wasn't the woman who sat quietly anymore. I wasn't the woman who let people decide my worth. I had walked away once, and I could do it again if I needed to. For the first time in years, I felt powerful. I felt free. And if there's one thing I want every woman, every mother, every wife who feels invisible, to know, it's this. You are worth more than what anyone else says about you. You are worth more than the weight you carry alone. And you don't have to prove your value to people who refuse to see it. Let them miss you. Let them see what happens when you stop holding the world together for them. Because sometimes, the only way to make them see your worth is to walk away. And if they don't see it, then you'll know you were always strong enough to stand on your own.